Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Slot Rods. Today I wanted to go over LEDs, both for track lighting and for your cars. I've dabbled around with this and messed with some varying lighting for the track. I did a lot of research leading up to this, different ways people were doing it. And there's a lot of different stuff out there, scenery stuff that I found. It was interesting, but it was also more trouble than it was worth. The amount of lights you could get hooked to it, things of that nature. So I did more research and came up with some different pieces of equipment. First, we'll start with a variable power adapter. This one you can dial up to whatever you want. Because you may be running 3 volt and 12 volt at the same time, depending on what you're lighting and how you're using it. This allows you to run multiple voltages off of one unit. Like you can crank this up to 17 volts or whatever you want and still run 3 volt lights without having to deal with resistors. A lot of these things you've had to start soldering in resistors. I mean, why deal with that? I didn't want to deal with it, so this is what I've come up with. So I start with a good power adapter. This is like $20 some or something on Amazon. Then you need a power distribution block, which we have here. This will distribute up to, I think there's at least 12. Yeah, at least 12 sets of lights you can run off of this, and you can daisy chain it as well. You can have one power lead coming off of here running to multiple lights. But to set your voltage, I have what's called a buck. This is a couple dollars on Amazon. And power comes in from the power adapter and then out to your distribution block. So you can have a distribution block pushing out power to multiple ones of these, say one for 3 volt and one for 12 volt, and then have this attached to another distribution block. So you can be running more than 12 volts off the power supply and then powering different lights at different voltages. So for instance, this one, there's a little screw here. You can turn that up or down and it will change your output voltage. So I have it set for about 3 volts, so I don't have to worry about resistors or anything else. I'm going to get 3 volts out and my lights are going to be okay. So the output goes to this, and then you can put in whatever lights you want. Like right now, I've just been testing some LEDs that I bought. These just were different sized LEDs that I was testing. This actually was a white light that I used a translucent yellow to get a brighter yellow. I found that a lot of the colored LEDs, like this one was a standard colored LED. It was orange, and you can see it's not that bright. This was a white LED, and then I just put the translucent paint over top of it, and I get the yellow color, but it's much brighter. So for instance, for like trying to light cars, trying to make a yellow headlight, this produces a much better light for the car. But also, as you saw, and if you watched the track layout, you saw some lights I had in one corner. These would be those lights. It's a 20 centimeter post, so you have good elevation over the track, so the light will light up a good bit of the track. These were getting a little harder to find. I just ordered 50 more off of AliExpress. I've seen a lot. The shorter ones are showing up that are about 5 centimeters, and that's just too close to the track for me. And I wanted the warm light. I don't really like the bright whites. It just gives a much more sterile look. I don't like the shadows, the way they throw the shadows. The warm light, I think, at least for me, it gives a better look to the track and reminds me of the old highway lights. But I did want to go with that warm white, so I got some more just to make sure I would have enough in the future. I also have these 4-post lights. These are a little shorter. The way I will compensate with that is I'll 3D print a longer post. I'll show you some of the 3D printing stuff I have in a minute. but this would be like going down the pit row. So one side would illuminate the track, the other side would illuminate the pit lane. So that's what I plan to use those for. But we'll look at some other LED options. You have your regular bulb types. Just regular bulbs. These are all 12 volt. As you can see, this is a pad. These are 3 millimeter. It's a clear bulb. You can get them in frosted, so it's a more diffused light. These are like $9 a bag. You can get these on eBay or Amazon. I think all these came off of eBay. It's 9 to 12 volt power. So you might be using these kind of LEDs on buildings. These are blue. You can see it's a very large frosted light. But these are all 12 volts. I've got a bunch of packs, a lot of packs of these in different colors and sizes, from 5 millimeter down to like 2 millimeter. But either way, these would be used for like lighting buildings and track fixtures. So I haven't really put these to use yet, but I did just get a bunch to test and stockpile for future use. The next would be car lighting. And I really didn't know what to use. I looked at a lot of different videos and people were using different things, but you don't know brightness until you check with it. I bought a bunch from different people. Here's like a small 1206. Those came off those came off of Amazon. Here's some more chip size. This from Evan Designs. They put a lot of packs together of different size lighting. They're really well done. They're more expensive, but it saves you from having to deal with extra soldering for the chips, which can be a pain, trust me. A lot of these different sizes have brightness issues. I've got some larger ones at Evans Design. They're called Deka, D-E-K-A. They're basically what's considered a 3528 size LED. And you can see, like for here, this is 3528. You can see the size of those chips. Now these are just the chips. I have to actually solder wires onto that. So I've got a headset magnifying glass and a very fine tipped for my soldering gun. But that's where, like these, I soldered that chip myself. It was a chip like this, and I did all that soldering there. We can get the camera to focus. Oh, we did. Let's see. Can we get it to focus? Probably not. Okay. Well, anyway, oh, there we go. So yeah, I had to solder all that myself. It's not difficult. It's not simple. It just takes a little practice, but anybody should be able to do it with the right equipment. You can get a decent solder gun pretty cheaply on Amazon as well. So that is this size, the 3528, and I've started using this size for the car lights, just for the brightness. If you want to do headlights and taillights, I want them to be bright. I want to get some show out of them. So these are the size that I found really work the best. Here's a set that came pre-wired. These came off of, I got these on eBay. But yeah, it's the 3528s. These were pre-wired. They came with resistors, but I don't need them. I'll show you how I've done that in the cars in a minute. But you can find these in a lot of different sizes and colors. 6000K. These were the warm lights. I have some in green. I've been testing these for the brightness. The greens are okay. The blues, the reds, the oranges are really not that bright. So I've tried to use, like for taillights, most of the time the tail light is going to be red anyways, red plastic. So you can use a white light and it will diffuse out the tail light as red. Every once in a while you might come across a car like I had to with my Maserati where it's clear and I had to use red lights to begin with. So in that case I had to use the brightest ones I could find. Those were from Evans Design, and I used 2 per tail light, and it worked real fine. So those are the different LEDs for cars. Like I said, there's smaller ones, but I found that they were just a waste of time. I didn't want to deal with lack of brightness, so it was the larger ones I went with. And yes, that meant I had to solder them. But you can get them from Evans Design, a couple bucks a pair, and they're called Deka, D-E-K-A. Let's see if I have a package of those still left. And I'll show you what it's written on. If I still have a package of them, I may have used them all already. Yeah, here you go. There's the DEKA from Evans Design. They're all 3 volt, but if you want to get them already pre-wired, you can go to Evans Designs, and those are the ones that I'm using for the headlights and taillights. If you don't want them doing yourself, you're looking for the 3528s. So how did they do in the car? All right, so when you are adding new lights to these cars, hold on one second, let me get the stuff I'm using. Some of the things you're going to need, of course, is a soldering iron. But you're also going to want some really small wire. I'm using stuff like here. This is from Evans Design. It's 28 gauge. Here's some more 30 gauge. You're going to want an X-Acto knife because you can't just basically trim this wire out. When you get down to this size, you're going to have to either use the soldering iron to melt the coating off the tip of the wire, or you're just going to have to be very careful and slowly scrape it away to get down to the bare wire. I do have a very good set of wire strippers that will go down to 32 gauge, but even with these wires, it's very difficult to use one of these. I've used it okay with 30 with this one. But even still, I usually have to use the X-Acto and scrape that off to get down to the bare wire. And here we'll look at the Maserati to start with. What I've done with this car. As you can see, the first thing I did was, of course, I chipped it with that slot.it chip. You can see I had to drill a hole for the infrared receiver. It picks up and sends the track signals. It's wired directly to the motor with a where I can disconnect it quick. But if you look on the inside here, there's a lot of wiring. Like I said, I've got twin LEDs for each tail light, and then I've got lights up here in the grill, and then lights for the headlights. These I really didn't have to drill, but there's a post that's part of the headlight, the clear headlight housing that runs through the body and kind of anchors it, and then I would put the LED up against that post to get it to transmit the light forward. And to finish that off, I'm using what's called liquid tape. It's like a liquid electrical tape. These things have a huge brush on them, so it's not the cleanest thing to deal with, but I'll get a smaller brush to brush it on and then clean that brush up later. The brush that comes in these caps is just way too large for that, but it works great. It dries pretty quick, and it eliminates all the just side lighting. It keeps it focused, and you don't have just light escaping everywhere out through the car. And I've done that with both the front and the back, so it keeps it really nice and clean. I'm not the greatest at soldering, so there's a lot of wire in here. I could have probably done a better job. You can disconnect these. They're plugged right into the chip here. This third one is for auxiliary brake lights, where I may use that on some other cars. I didn't really need it here, but you have the fronts and the rears. You can, from Schlossnick, I talked to them, and they said you can roughly run up to 6 LEDs off of each connector without much of an issue. So you could have 6 running off the tail light connector, 6 off the headlight. So I've got 4 on each right now. And in the car, I have images of the car in the first, I think it's in my track layout video, and it's also, I think you can see it when I go over, when I kind of pass by the cars during the last of the car reveals. This was a fun project. I was looking forward to this, to really just do a illumination job of my own. This was my first one, so it was kind of interesting, but it came out all right. It looks pretty good. The other car I did was the NSR Mercedes. This one took more work. I guess they don't think about you doing this to begin with, or care, and the headlight units are all solid. I had to drill holes inside for the headlights. It looks like it's got some dust on it from when I was doing the tire deal. But yeah, that took a lot more work. At least there was nothing behind the driving light. I was able to just stick a LED up against it and it shone through just fine. But yeah, I had to drill holes in the behind the headlights and be very, very careful to get light to come through. And the rear was a lot easier. Again, there's posts that stick through, and you just put the LED up against that post, and it distributes the light through the rear lens. Again, this was another slot.it chip, and you can see all the different, where all the cables go. A lot of cables. And then I covered everything with that liquid electrical tape to prevent the light bleed. And looks pretty darn good. I'm really pleased with how they illuminate. So that's with the cars. Now on to some of that track lighting stuff, what I've done with the 3D printing. If you watched some of the previous ones, you could see the guardrails I did. This was a piece that was I had found that another guy had made guardrails with. He only had 2. I like the idea of a third rail. I did not like the connector piece he had. It didn't work too well. I had trouble with it, and I had to do a lot of sanding. This squeeze position, it works a lot easier. It's especially easier for me to get in and out when I'm messing with it. I've used this on some other, adapter. I came up with this one myself. Had to do some changes here for moving wire in and out. But this grasps just fine, and it's a lot easier to get in and out as far as I'm concerned. I set this hole on top, changed the size of it, and put it all the way through to deal with varying post size for whatever I might want to do. As if you saw before, I had some posts that had like a corner marker on it. You can put any other kind of sign you want on those. But I've also used it for my lights. For example, I have this set up, which this light post will slide through, and then this just simply goes into here. And then you have your light posts. Now, if I want it to higher, for instances where I want the light to be higher, like in this case, I can use a longer post. I have this set up for putting on top of my the barrier between the pit lane. So this will go in here and give me a nice boost to height for the pit lane lights. And if I want it bigger, I can make it bigger. But this is all runs off my, just design this in Blender, and my 3D printer prints this stuff out pretty darn fast. I'm probably going to change this though. I've been using with those metal rods, but I found that they just put way too much tension, and it'll cause these things to pull in, which I don't like the look of that. Even with this being tight, it pulls, and it pulls the track a bit. But yeah, it will pull this in, keeping the light from being straight. So I may get rid of all this and redesign this to maybe even just put a slot in here where I can fix typical Carrera guardrail system, and just, I can just glue it to it, or I may come up with something completely different. But that eventually will be redesigned. But I still like this for being able to make a guardrail and a light post out of the same item. For instances where I just want a light post, I created this. It has a similar base underneath. It allows me to route electrical wire in and out, because wire is going to come through here from the light, and then I can take it under the track or off to the sides or straight down through the whatever I have the track mounted to. But like the other one, this will fit right in here, and it fits pretty snug. You just work the wires down and you've got your light post. If anybody wants to goes and uses these, and wants the printer files for these sort of things, I'll make those available if anybody wants them. These have been my favorite lights. They're just because they're small. Some of the stuff I've seen, you guys are using really thick light posts and things like that, which doesn't really look good to me. I like these thinner posts, especially for the scale. It looks pretty good, I think. But yeah, if anybody wants any of these, wants the printer files, let me know. I can make those available. They're designed to work with these lights. Again, you can get those on eBay. I have seen some on Amazon, AliExpress. Just make sure, at least in this case, they're the 20 centimeter lights, and it's 1/50th scale. So that's basically what I have for the track lighting. I don't have much done because I really don't plan to leave it on the floor forever, and it makes harder to move wiring around when it's just sitting on the floor. But one of these days when I can put it in its own room and actually landscape and do those sort of things, then I can put these out the way I want and really illuminate the track. But for now, I'm just tinkering, figuring out what works, and so far this is what I've got. So that will do it for the LED edition, and thanks for watching. Okay, so I just wanted to end the video with a little snapshot here of those things set up on the track. As you can see, I've got that little turn signpost put in there. You can see, you can actually see how this is pulling a little bit, how it pulls the track a bit. But these are the light posts. And I turn the lights down in the room so you can get an idea just how nicely they illuminate it. It looks a bit more white than these are actually the soft white, about the 3500K lights. It looks a little bit more white, but in reality it's more yellow light. But they do light up the track quite nicely. So there they are, and that's how all that looks.